You and I have had conversations about the first dose versus the second dose a couple of times now. We've gotten another study out of Pfizer having to do hearing more about the first dose, particularly for folks that have had COVID. Any of these new studies giving you any sense of where we would change our vaccine distribution schedule? Make it where we're 12 weeks for everybody or 6 weeks for everybody. What of these studies is giving you any sense of whether we should change these protocols?
Well, Chuck, I think the people need to appreciate the view is there are really two very different scenarios that you just painted. One is if you've been infected and you get vaccinated after that, what about one dose? The other is if you've not been infected and you get one dose of Pfizer, can you get away with one dose or prolong the second dose? And I would still maintain that there are enough unknowns in that, particularly the durability of the protection. We know from studies that we did that antedated and led up to the very, very impressive results with the 94 to 95% efficacy with both Moderna and Pfizer, that when you give a boost, you increased the power or the level of the antibodies by at least tenfold. So you're talking about a very, very big increase. We don't know what the durability of a single dose is, and it really is risky for lack of protection and risky to engender, perhaps, some variants. With regard to following infection, that's a different story because the data look really quite impressive that if you've been infected and then you get a single dose, the boost that you get with that single dose is really enormous. So we're looking very carefully about that. And that is one thing that you might want to consider, but we want to really carefully look at the data first. But those are two different scenarios. You don't want to confuse them.
And I was just going to say, so let's say you see the science and you feel good about this, about if you've had COVID, one dose may be enough. I'm just curious, logistically, what would that mean? Would you have somebody would have to come in and show proof they've had COVID? Is that something, or they would be tested there for antibodies? Like, I feel like that's the one gap here that would complicate it just logistically.
Right. Well, that's the reason why I held back, Chuck, in saying, yes, let's recommend that. You've really got to look at the science, look at the data, and figure out what's the best way. The obvious one that you think of is the documentation that if you do an antibody test and it's very clear that this person has been infected, that then you could be reasonably comfortable that you're dealing with someone who is post-infection. But I would reserve any kind of decisions about that until we very carefully looked at the data.